Welcome to the Women and Wealth podcast with Esther Sabo. Esther is a respected leader in the field of personal financial advice with over 25 years of experience. After going through her own significant and challenging life-changing events, she overcame fear and self-doubt to launch her own successful advisory firm. Now Esther is ready to share her practical and personal experiences to help other women clear their hurdles and brave life's transitions. In this way, she inspires women to lead fulfilling and confident lives.
Hello and welcome to Women in Wealth with Esther Sabo from Gates Pass Advisors. Good afternoon, Esther. How are you?
Hi, Eric. I'm doing well. We start with the weather report, but it looks like we may actually get something called precipitation, which in California is something we are quite thirsty for. But I'm doing great. Thank you.
Nice. Yeah, no, we're we had ice a couple days ago, and today's going to be a high of 70. So who knows?
I know you guys get really volatile weather situations out there.
Yeah. Okay, the weather report is done. What are we talking about for real today?
What we're talking about as as this comes out, this will be towards the end of December. And obviously we're coming to the end of 2020. And on one hand, it's felt like it's gone so fast. Mm-hmm. And on the other, it's been such a year of being out of our comfort zone. It's been such a disruptive year that many people can't wait for it to be over.
Yeah, I see that. I feel that. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, so it's a date on a calendar. 2021, January 1st of 2021. I'm not going to be doing anything different as far as wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. I'll be wearing it, of course, taking all the precautions and all that. I don't think certain things end, but I can see a significance of, that calendar date changing and being hopeful for what 2021 brings.
Yeah. And, as you're talking, it's like we are all geared towards this calendar as being the indicator, something that we can hang our hats on. It's been such a year of uncertainty. And we initially thought it might be weeks, right, before we could get back to normal. Certainly in March, it was like, oh, well, okay. I mean, I remember when we were first told to shelter in place. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, no, I'm not going to do it. It was quite rebellious. I remember talking about it with my staff people. And then I thought, well, it's not about you, Esther. It's about the staff. It's what needs to happen. Mm-hmm. And I acquiesced, so to speak. But I did talk about this early on because if I bring it back to our stages of transition, we're certified financial transitionists at Gates Pass. And what the heck does that mean? There are actual stages of transition. We bring clarity and focus to changes that seem really ambiguous and uncertain. And this COVID is certainly a transition time. Mm-hmm. And in early stages of something new in our lives, it is so normal to try and hurry up and get through these stages. So it's not a surprise that initially we thought it would go much quicker than it has. And now we're more geared to thinking it is likely to be years before we are back to normal. And that's a lot to digest. That's a lot to consider.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to think about the different stages of life. My parents' attitude toward it, my attitude toward it, my children's attitude toward it, and then my grandkids thinking that this is a normal thing, because they're so young. They're like, okay, this is how the world really works. I'm like, oh man, that's right. It's almost depressing in a way. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to what the normal is if we get back to that. And again, hopefully we do. But to be able to go outside and play without a mask on would be fantastic.
Yeah, I was on a call last night and someone said they watched a local school. They were taking their dog out for a walk or something. And they watched a local school and all the kids were on recess and they had to play within certain circles of socially distant circles. And she had the same comment, like, what will it be like for them when it comes back to normal? It will seem odd to them not to be in socially distant circles to play.
Yeah, and you get to teach them tag. Because, they can't play it right now, right?
Right.
All sorts of new games they can play.
And so as this year ends, we may all be feeling a feeling of fatigue, whether it's from the year, the media, the uncertainty, all of, obviously the election, the politics, the COVID, what's going to happen, and the impact of all of this on our personal life. I still can't help it. This is a financial planning podcast, and I still want to address the importance of planning, particularly from a framework of persistence.
Okay.
And I'm tentative to bring up the word persistence, because when you hear the word persistence, what do you think of? Let me see if my hesitancy is accurate.
Well, it's actually good and bad, but my first inkling is persistence, kind of nagging, right? It's a nagging thing. It's constantly there. If somebody is persistent, that can be positive as well. You're persistent as seeking a job, but you're working hard to get that and attain the skills that you need for that. That's positive, but you are correct. My first inkling kind of goes toward the negative of being bothersome or something that's nagging.
Yeah, that's what I felt like. Oh, I don't really want to say persistence because it can sound like we never get a break, and boy, do we need a break at this point. And so many women especially have reported and shared about the challenge of trying to work from home, manage people from home, meaning their teams that they're working with, their children are being schooled from home, and how difficult it's been to manage well and feel effective. And so when somebody comes along and says, well, be persistent, it's like, yeah,
Take a hike. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the word. That's what
that's the nice way to put it on the podcast.
That's what I was going to say. So I'm not coming from that place of, tighten your jaw and just lean in no matter what. It is more from a standpoint of being concerned that there is so much fatigue that there will be a significant loss of focus on what's truly meaningful and within reach. So being persistent about what is in our control and bringing that into focus. What can we control? Keeping that focus there, being persistent about how do we stop and take care of ourselves? How do we stop and get the rest that we need? Even if it's just for today, having that be our persistence around no matter what, I'm going to be here in 2021 and 2022. No matter what, my kids are getting older. No matter what, I need to earn money or I need to stay healthy or all of the above. So that's where my focus is on persistence, persistently coming back to taking good care of ourselves and aligning ourselves well with our personal finances.
Yeah. Again, incredibly important because persistence when it comes to goal setting is, and you've said this so many times before, that's a very positive thing, right? And so we just can't lose sight of those goals, whatever the goals are, financial or personal or health, like you said. Persistence is a very good thing in that.
Yeah, and I see myself in the role of a client's trusted advisor as not being the one who has the whip to say, get up, keep going at all. It's often to be that coach to a client, to listen, to be the one who's the receptacle is the word that comes to mind, to hear all the things that are difficult, that make it hard to stay focused on those financial goals, to be that understanding and empathetic guide to say, yep, I get it. When everything falls apart, it's really hard to put myself back together one more time. And with my clients, I'm not there to say, put yourself back together one more time. I'm there to say, I get it. I understand. And if I switch it to financial planning, these are some of the resistances. I guess that's what I want to talk about is some of the resistances to financial planning, because I've heard it said financial planning is not a predictor. What's the point of doing a plan? Somebody might say, well, could you have predicted that there was going to be a pandemic or wildfires that devastated California? The homes that were lost as a result of that, this incredible market drop that occurred in February into March, and then the historic bull market that followed. Could you have predicted that? What's your planning say? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. I agree. Planning is not fortune telling.
Yeah.
But I disagree that financial planning has limited use in the face of the unknown.
So Esther, do you think it's because people have just a limited knowledge of what planning truly entails. They think it's just you plan to retire, so you put a bunch of money away and then it's at risk in the market, so on and so forth. But they're truly not understanding the complexity of what a plan is. And if a pandemic does hit and you're in a certain stage of life that where you're protecting more of your finances, then you don't lose as much as you would have maybe 20 years before when you were a little bit more aggressive. Those types of thoughts, do you think they just don't understand it?
I think I would say yes, but I wouldn't put it on the individual. I would put it on our industry. Our industry has been so geared to planning. I mean, planning, first of all, the profession of financial planning is a relatively young profession. It came out of life insurance sales. So that, maybe since the 60s, or 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's maybe 50 years. And it was co-opted a lot by the investment advisory world to say, oh, let's say if you plan and you save with us, whether it's into a life insurance product or if you use me as your, at that time, stockbroker for me to make the picks for you, you will achieve your goals. So much of it was geared towards, here's your plan now. Here's how I can help you attain the outcome by buying my particular product or service.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that's very embedded in the national psyche around planning. When with the more self-help tools that have come up as a result of the internet age that we're in, it can then seem like, well, maybe I don't need a planner. I can just input this information into some particular online product and it will tell me how I'm doing. So that's not planning either at all. And what I see as planning, it is a lot more complex. It's a lot about an engaged discussion before we get to charts and graphs and all of those things. It is about connecting in with a client and saying what's important and what options do we have? Eric, my associate, talks a lot about what are our limits on this playing field. You may say, okay, I want to do incredible things in terms of I'd like 3 houses and I'd like to move here and there and I'd like to retire at age 35, all of that. That may be possible or it may not. But what are the how can we get as close to what you say you would like as possible? And we do that and we drill down first, because if somebody, I'll use an example of a recent client who's a widower and his wife sadly passed away unexpectedly. She did have cancer, but there was really the thought, she was like, I'm fighting this.
Mm-hmm.
And really until the week she passed, all expected a recovery. And this was a horrible shock. And he needed a sense of, my goodness, my world just blew up. What am I standing on? Not under. What am I standing on in terms of financial security, given she was the primary breadwinner?
Mm-hmm.
Am I safe? I mean, it's a very near-term, understandable question. We often need to have these questions answered, especially in the face of a really dramatic, unexpected loss.
Yeah.
So in that case, has been more of a data gathering, input process. We included various options for his retirement and long-term care. What if he needs long-term care?
Mm-hmm.
We typically do that. What if that's a situation? How is he protected for that? And actually, all of those show that you do have financial security as you're living right now. And what that does is buy him time to process this tremendous loss. Yeah.
I mean, that takes one thing off his plate, if you will, or relieves it from his mind, because he's got so many other things in there and it's just too much to think about.
Yeah. And so it is too much to think about because there's an estate to administer. There's other pieces to shore up that weren't shored up before that, okay, they're all administrative pieces, if you will. But when one's going through a great loss, one's capacity is decreased. One's mental abilities are decreased. One's energy is decreased. So if one doesn't have to think about, oh my gosh, am I going to have to move in 3 months? Great. And in fact, I don't have to move at all. Isn't that wonderful? Mm-hmm. Now, where this may have paused for others and say, hey, you've got a great plan, quote unquote, what we learned through the process. So planning for us is more of a process, an ongoing process where we do get, like in this case, specific answers to questions. But what we learned is, you know what? I don't really want the status quo. I appreciate where I'm living, but I actually only moved here because of her.
Yeah.
And I ultimately want to live in a completely different environment. And so planning, again, it's like if we had stopped there and said, okay, our work is done, see ya. Our work is not done. However, part of planning is saying, what is the timing for these decisions? What is your capacity to make those changes? And also, what will be gained by moving? Like, tell us about that. What is it about moving? What is it about this different place that you want to live? What are you seeking to accomplish by making this change? When do you think you would like to be making this change? Having all those conversations is to get down to what are the real motivators here? Because sometimes what you find out is, well, my kids want me to move. Well, I think it will free up more money if I do that. Or it can be, I just really like this type of living in this other environment better. There can be so many answers, Eric, to the questions.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, and a lot of those answers can be skewed by what we want, right? Not necessarily reality, but we paint a picture. Oh, if I live in this area, I'm going to be so much happier because of A, B, or C. Or like you said, it's going to save me a lot of money if I do that. Well, maybe not. Have you actually truly run the numbers, or are you just kind of thinking, A plus B equals C kind of scenario? And I think we just emotionally want to make things better. We want to look on the bright side of things in a lot of ways, and that can really screw up our judgment.
Yeah, it can, especially, if you think of a year like this with all the changes that have gone on, it can be, I think more people right now are actually a bit more frozen than wanting to make quick judgments. But in other years, when the markets are up, when real estate is up, everything looks great, it can motivate us to make quick changes, quick decisions, because it seems like nothing could go wrong.
Yeah.
And if it's not done in context with a really active thought partner who does not have skin in the game, so to speak, where they're unbiased, they won't be like a spouse where whatever the decision is going to impact their living or children or anything like that. It can be so helpful just to keep processing through. So tell me more about why a move is important to you.
Yep.
Tell me more about what is the concern about financial support. Tell me more about what do you think you need. Tell me more about where you don't feel provided for in your current situation. And it's exciting for us. We appreciate it. We want to find out more because ultimately the client is living this life. We are not, they are. And we want to know what their internal motivators are, their values, their passions, and to listen unjudgmentally and just find out more. Because you know what, Eric?
What?
Have your internal motivators, your values, your passions, have they changed because of who occupies the White House?
No.
Or what the state with COVID is?
Not my internal motivators, no.
Or what the headlines are?
No. I like to ignore those.
Yeah. Exactly.
As much as possible.
It's good. I know. Have you noticed compared to a year ago, how much I think so. Well, some people are just drilled into it 24/7 and others are like, I've really got to limit this. And my personal bias is that I think it's better to limit.
Yeah. Well, I like the internal motivators. It's a huge issue because I like the fact that you have so much experience with people going through transition. And in this case, it's a gentleman. But you can also bring to mind what a major move and change can do to his social circle, because he's just lost his wife, and you want some stability there. And as much as maybe his kids want him to move closer because they're concerned about him and being lonely, most likely his kids have jobs and he's not going to have that much time with them anyway. No offense to anybody out there, but that's just how life works a lot of times.
Yeah.
And maybe his circle of friends is going to be a great support system for the next 6 months, maybe next year. And then he can make that decision. But if he moves too quickly, then he loses not only his wife, it's his social circle, and he doesn't get the time that he thought he was going to have with his family. And that can be a pretty lonely place.
Yeah. And all of those those discussions, they don't necessarily go directly to, well, let's talk about tax savings and let's talk about estate plan. It's more like, tell me about you. Have you considered this?
Yeah.
And allowing that time for those things. I'm so glad you brought that up, because these are critical non-financial, quote unquote, non-financial issues that really impact the decisions that people make that may seem on the surface to be a financial decision, but they can really be detrimental to one's financial health and well-being. It's funny because when we go back to those internal motivators and external, I should say, actually, given that you brought up the kids, in this particular case, the kids are saying, oh, I don't really want you to, and this happens also with loss. When a parent has lost, they're like, oh, I don't want you to sell the house because that was where we knew mom.
Yeah.
And if and this is where family meetings can come into play, where we engage and we listen and we hear and we share about some on the technical part of it, of why it's important. But all of this to me is talking about allowing there to be time.
Yes.
If we go back to persistence, this theme of persistence, it doesn't mean persistently pushing one's own agenda, but persistently saying, I'm not ready to just put this on the shelf because of what my kids say or because of anxiety about the markets or whatever. I'm not willing just to let go of what I think is right for me. I want to be persistent. It may mean, I often think about baking and cooking. You know, when you cook something, you don't cook it on high the whole time.
No, I learned that lesson a long time ago. It'll get done faster if I put it to 550.
Exactly. Exactly. What if I just broil it? Then it'll be 3 minutes.
Exactly.
One has to allow, the food, when it's well cooked, it's well seasoned, it's tender, it's tenderized perhaps in advance. There's steps to take. And it's the same thing with the cooking of our plans. It's like, be persistent in allowing the space for one's true thoughts, motivators to come up. And it can take a while. It can take that time.
Esther, just using your example, you said you're working with that gentleman, and I know that mainly you work with women in transition. Obviously, you work with both people in both sexes in transition.
Both genders.
Yeah, but it really is interesting to me to see the different behaviors between men and women, and the ups and downs of the market, the numbers that are constantly being thrown at us, percentages and everything else, then dealing with being in transition as well. Do you see a difference between how men approach this and how women approach this?
What I see often is that this industry is still a very male-dominated industry, and it's actually not even a very diverse male-dominated industry. And what women report often is that they don't feel like they're spoken to, that if they had gone in the past with a man, if they were in a heterosexual couple and they went with a man to see their advisor, the advisor would just talk to the man and not them. And a common thing I also hear from women, not all women, but some is, well, I'm not a numbers person. I don't get all this stuff. Your charts, your graphs, I don't want to see that. And there's a feeling of deeper than that, if that there's a hesitation to talk to a financial planner, because then they're going to ask me or talk to me about numbers and charts, and I'm going to end up feeling inadequate. Like, I don't get it. I'm not smart enough, or it's going to be annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And this speaks to one of the things. First of all, it's completely understandable.
Yeah.
I don't blame men or women, but in this case, women, for feeling that way, because guess what? Our industry can have an incredible amount of mumbo jumbo jargon.
Yep. I agree.
Sorry, Eric, I keep talking over you. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. No, I was going to say, I completely agree with that statement. And working with many advisors, I have seen where some, and I'll say it's mainly men, that feel like they need to talk in a certain language to show how smart they are. Right. And it's so annoying. I'm sorry. It just bothers me to no end, because I'm like, it's like your doctor coming in and telling you all the technical names of every body part.
Yeah.
Don't just tell me my arm is jacked up. All right. My arm's broken or whatever. Don't tell me what bone it is. Just fix it. So.
Well, and also, tell me what's going on, and also have some empathy, because like, gosh, that's really painful. I have other clients who have had this, and I totally get how painful it is.
Yeah. See, that'd be nice to add too.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. So how do you help women overcome that? Because it's incredibly important that they're engaging, but I can see why they wouldn't want to.
Right. I think a lot is when from the very beginning, when we first talk with a prospective client, we say, well, what is it that brings you to us? It's a very, what do you want to talk about today? I think that's one of the main things, is our focus is on the client. And it's hard sometimes, Eric. Oh my goodness. You can tell I'm a talker. I want to talk, but it's so important to get in the client's shoes, to hear where they are. And being a trusted advisor to us means that we are not just coming from graphs and pictures. We really get down to what is it our clients need. Using the example of the widower before, it's like we could have said our job is done when we showed that they were secure, but it's that part of the job is done at this point with the timing, but that's not the whole picture. So it is sitting and with them and kind of like having a cup of tea and just saying, tell me about yourself. Tell me what you need.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic.
And then we can put into their plans what they have told us, because they do want answers. That's the other part of it. They do want answers. They do want to know, as we all do, we want answers of where we're going. When I engage a planner as well, and it is to get perspective. I'm coming to you because I see you as an expert in financial planning, and I would like to know if I'm on firm ground, or I am considering doing something that this might be kind of wild, they tell me, but I really would like to do this. And it's almost like in a hushed tone.
Yeah.
And they do want to know like how we can deliver that information to them. And often, even in the meetings, we may not refer to the charts and graphs very much in our presentation. We do rely on that technical information. We do spend time offline when we're not in the meeting, digging into that, kicking its tires, etc., so that we can come back and say, this is what we've seen.
Yeah, my wife and I have this issue, and we know that we battle this issue. But here's the thing. I'm a total geek. I'm a total nerd when it comes to computers and audio and wiring my entire house up for everything possible that it can do, and all the conveniences and Alexa in every room and all that jazz. And she just doesn't care. Right? She does not care one bit. Well, she's an amazing cook. I mean, amazing cook. And she makes designer cakes, and she does all sorts of things. And here's the thing, is that when I tell her what I'm doing, or telling her the process of what I'm doing, how I'm wiring the house, she fights.
Out.
Yes, she fights the glazed over look and the hearing Charlie Brown's teacher, right? And so, and it's the same thing. She'll tell me, I'll say, oh, that's amazing. How did you do that? I asked that question. I just set myself up. But now she's telling me what she did to bake this amazing cake and all the different things she's done with fondant. I think that's what you call it. And these frostings, she makes her own frosting. And I'm just sitting there with my eyes going, oh, please, please, please don't let her see that I'm glazing over and hearing Charlie Brown's teacher.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. But because I just like the end result. I really want my cake, and I want to eat it too. right? And I don't care how it got made. I appreciate her doing all that work. I love her to death for it, but I just don't need to know all the steps it took to make the cake.
Right.
Right. And so I think that's where a lot of people are with talking to you. And that's just my opinion, but they don't need to know all the little tiny pieces that you're doing. They just know that this is the end result I want, that cake. And I'd love to enjoy that. And maybe it's more about trust. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think it is where that's applicable to the work we do. I think often advisors get so excited about all the work that we've done that we want to show the clients, well, we thought about this, and we thought about this inflation factor, and we thought about this allocation, and it's like, it's exactly, those are great examples. It's exactly the same thing. Clients don't need to hear all of that. What clients want to hear is, we looked at a lot of things. We can ask, would you like us to tell you all the things we looked at? Often it's like, no, I just want to know where I'm going.
Yeah.
So many people, we're in information overload these days. And my goodness, if they allocate time for financial planning and for listening and addressing and contemplating, that's plenty. They don't need to know all of the rest, because really what makes the difference is our own mental habits a lot of the time. What are the habits that one has that may be limiting their vision of options and opportunities? They don't need to know how we go about the process of checking out whether or not this is possible. This is why it's exciting to us for the widower that I spoke of earlier.
Yeah.
It's exciting to know that they want to do something. Oh, great. Let's see what we can do to make it happen. Or what we can say is, well, you might not be able to do this, but would you be willing to consider this? Would that work? And have this engaged process. So with your wife, I would say it's more like, what I hear you wanting to give her is just appreciation.
Yeah.
That you have met my need. This is great. And I so appreciate your excitement. I'm so sorry. Just like how I get excited when I'm talking about the geeky stuff, but you can't take it in. I can't take it all in, but I so appreciate what you're sharing with me. And it's the same way. Clients just want to hear, oh, good. I've gotten off my shoulders the worries that I've had, and I feel heard, and I can move forward. And or if I don't feel like I can move forward right now, that's okay too. We're okay in my practice. We're okay if the client needs to take a break.
Yeah.
It's okay. It doesn't have to all be sorted out. But where I want them to be persistent is not neglecting where it is they want to go. So as we come to the end of the year, I really encourage listeners to consider if they would like, first of all, where they are, and if they've had this type of conversation with anyone, if they'd like to just unburden themselves about where they are with regards to their personal finances, without having to worry if they're going to engage a financial planner and start on this whole process. Just if you want to unburden yourself in terms of your own state with personal finance, I welcome those conversations. So as we come to the end of this year, I really encourage listeners to consider if they would just like to have a conversation about where they are with regards to their personal finances in light of everything that's gone on this year. Yep, we're going to flip the calendar. December 31st to January 1st may not make a lot of difference in terms of what we're battling, but it is a sign of time marching on. So if one would like to have this conversation without feeling pressured to even make immediate changes, become somebody different than who they are, in fact, to have a conversation and be heard about who they are, I really welcome that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you always have been extremely open to those conversations. And I'm going to encourage every listener, if you want to have your cake and eat it too, as we were talking about, and I'll give you a hint, you don't broil cakes. Just don't. Broiling cake's not a good idea. Then you do need to reach out. And Esther, how do they get a hold of you if they want to start this conversation?
The best thing is to go to our website, gatespassadvisors.com, and click on the contact button. It's really easy. Just let us know that you'd like to have a conversation, what it might be about, and we'll set up a call with you. And our calls always are, this is what we do. We may not be a fit for you, or this may just be a conversation that you want to have, and then we'll see if it makes sense to move forward or not. That's okay. Don't be worried that you're going to get inundated with a lot of follow-up. We just want to be here for you.
Absolutely. I love your heart in this. I always have, and you've always been very encouraging to me and to the folks that you work with, obviously. And I hope people take advantage of that and really reach out and have that conversation with you.
I hope so too, because in these times, connection is the main thing, not isolation, connection.
Absolutely. Thank you, Esther, so much for your time today.
Thank you, Eric.
You bet. And the last thank you, of course, goes to the listening audience. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Women in Wealth podcast with Esther Sabo. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Esther comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family, and we'd love for you to do that. Again, thanks so much for listening today. For everyone at Gates Pass Advisors, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Women and Wealth podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you receive notifications of new podcasts as they become available. Check out the website at www.gatespassadvisors.com for more information. This content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions expressed and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security.